welcome to Femtech Leaders Podcast. A very warm welcome from me, Latifa Khan, your Femtech Leader host. So this is episode 3, and I'm trying to keep the topics on the impact of women in technology on innovation and economic growth, and the benefits of having a more diverse workforce in terms of problem solving and creativity. So, hope you guys enjoyed the last episode on why culture is important in the workplace. If you've not checked it out yet, feel free to check it out on the socials. I got some really good feedback, so I'm hoping to implement some of those positive criticisms and also some great feedback to take on board from everyone. So, thank you very much. I've had a really busy week interviewing some really amazing women and talking about allyship within the femtech industry. So I'm hoping to share some of those with you. I've got a really interesting person that I'll be releasing the episode next week. So I'm really interested in sharing that with everybody. So tune in and make sure you guys give me some feedback on that. And also, I hope it helps. That's like main reason for doing this. So let's kick into the topic here. So, what are the benefits of having more of a diverse workforce, you might ask? Well, in my opinion, and I'm sure everyone has their own opinion on this, DEI is like a word or acronym, if you like, that gets thrown around quite a lot. Some people don't really know, what it stands for and what diversity, equality, and inclusion actually means. Is it just a checkbox exercise for large organizations or even smaller ones? How do you define culture? All these kind of questions people ask. But, specifically, let's just talk about, women in technology as an example. I think that DEI is super important within my world of work, and that's simply because I've seen it create innovation and economic growth. And from a diverse perspective and experience, if you like, I've seen it open up a real wide range of ideas and solutions to certain topics. And it can also sort of help challenge the unconscious bias and group thinking. And having done a lot of research on this field specifically, I've noticed that research has also shown that companies with diverse workforces tend to perform better financially. Who would have thought, right? Well, having a diverse workforce also, I've noticed, has many benefits. Now, this isn't just from what I've seen in my lifetime, but also just from what I've been hearing and also the research that I've done, that women are underrepresented in the technology industry. And actually, it's more than that. It's more than just the technology industry. I think because this podcast is specifically about women in tech, I tend to kind of talk about tech in general, but just in general, I think women in the workplace are underrepresented, unfortunately, specifically around DEI world. Let's just say there's not enough color in the workplace, and there's not enough talent of color in the workplace, and that might not be a company's fault. It could be the lack of talent, it could be the lack of people applying for jobs. It really does depend. So, and that is something that I think quite a lot of industries are trying to close that gap in terms of sort of increasing diversity and addressing issues such as the gender pay gap and lack of female representation in leadership positions. So, this week I have actually been to a really cool event. Actually, I've been to quite a few, but one of them that stood out the most was agriculture in technology. Now, I know we've spoken about innovation and economic growth and all these kind of things within workplaces, and this podcast is sort of on topic for this. So recently, last week I went to an event specifically around agriculture and technology, and it was so interesting to see what, and this was held by a group of women that are part of Women in Telecoms Technology. One of the women I'm lucky enough to work with and invited me with a group of people, and these women have been in the tech, specifically telecoms tech industry, for many years, and they brought together a group of people, male and female, by the way, because we'll talk about allyship separately, but they brought these people together to really get them thinking about why agri tech is, I guess, the right term to use, is so important moving forward, and how we're digitalizing the agricultural industry, specifically within technology. Now, they came together and spoke about, how, and again, it was a group of women that came together, and they spoke about what telecom industries are doing to digitalize the agriculture in sub-Saharan African countries, if you like, but mainly in Australia and the UK. And the strawberries, for example, fun fact here for you all, the strawberries that you see at Wimbledon and probably eat and, I guess, utilize however you like, are manufactured in such conditions sometimes you don't actually sit there and think, where did the strawberry come from and how did it get here? Well, there's so many women and men and robots, by the way, that are working to build the best strawberries and bring them to you for Wimbledon as a prime example. Now, you're probably thinking, cost of farms and cost of living, all this kind of stuff is increasing as we move forward with life, or especially in this day and age anyway, in this economy. How is it that farmers still get paid the same and the technology and the people power and time is not increasing? I mean, the cost of that is increasing, if you like. Probably should have worded that properly, but there you go. So how is that possible? How many people are investing in agri-tech? How many people are actually looking at the technology that's used for good quality strawberries that have to be made 365 days a year in all weather conditions and get them to Wimbledon, if you like? Now, there's so many companies like Vodafone, as an example, that are trying their best and have invested so much money through MyWebFarm, which is a cloud-based platform that allows producers to capture agricultural information. So this could be physical, chemical, microbial, soil analysis, if you like, pest presence, satellite, and even remote sensing information data from various internet connected farming sensors. They brought this together to help farmers increase yield whilst not damaging the environment, and also allowing them to continue to be invested in. So there's over 8,000 farms across 4 continents, specifically within Africa, that use MyFarmWeb. And this year, Vodafone have explained and expanded to Europe, accelerating digitalization across agricultural industry and collaborating with the farming community. Now, the people that I met last week at this event, they have their own crop farms. They also have their own businesses that have been going on for many years, and they specifically talk about what they need from people to be more successful. And some of the facts that they actually mentioned was that food and ag tech, as an example, is the least digitalized of all major industries, which I found quite shocking. And 20 to 30% of crops are lost to pests and pathogens every year, and it's not really being accelerated by climate change, let's just put it that way. And agriculture is responsible for 31% of global greenhouse gas emissions globally. 26.4% of global population is experiencing moderate or severe levels of food security, and with that, the world has lost a third of its arable land in the last 40 years due to current agricultural practices. Oh, on top of that, a third of food produced for human consumption is wasted or lost in the supply chain globally, and that's about 1.3 billion tons a year. Now, if you just really deep that and just think, okay, how can AgTech help with the battle against climate change? You've got to invest in the right technologies needed to drive that change. And some things that I found out, that the agricultural sector emits 31% of global carbon, and also 75% of soil on Earth is now degraded. Now you think about the sort of carrots and your Christmas meal that you had that feels like it was many years ago, which actually only was a couple of months ago. You look at all your fruit and veg that you eat and you think, okay, this was all grown in the ground and it's a fruit or it's a vegetable, therefore it's healthy for me. I beg to differ, my friends. This is not true. So if you think about the soil that's contaminated and the amount of pesticides that are hanging about in these areas, and then you've got your fruit and veg that's growing from that ground, comes to your plates, in many different superstores. How clean is that? I don't think it's very clean. So these organizations that are running these successful farms, they're making sure that they pick the most smart technology. Half the time hasn't been invested in, which is why ag tech is something that most companies are now sort of looking at now, and we're trying to build more awareness around it. You look at they're looking at these technologies and thinking, how can we build this, how can we make it better? So I think I spoke about strawberries earlier. Now smart strawberries is the area of conversation that I actually wanted to go down. So this is Vodafone's IoT technology that's serving up the perfect strawberry this Wimbledon. So there is a lady who I met last week who runs Hugh Lau Farms, and she is partnering with Vodafone and Wimbledon exclusive strawberry supplier. So she'll be the only person or farm, if you like, that will be supplying the strawberries there. Is pivoting towards Vodafone's IoT technology to help optimize farming. And I think I mentioned earlier what Vodafone are doing in this area, and I think it's super super cool. Now there's so much technology that farmers are using as an example to digitalize and also produce healthy sustainable environments, to make sure that, you know, we one are keeping on top of technology, two, keeping on top of global warming, and three, making sure that people are putting goodness into their bodies. That how often is it that we actually look at fruit and veg and we think, you know, this is great, or this is really healthy, but it's not. So agriculture has a long way to go, but it has also played a very pivotal role in the developments of modern society. Now we know that, you know, today our planet faces a massive food crisis at a super unprecedented level, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations predicts that the world population will reach around 9.1 billion by 2050. So to meet the growing demand, the world will have to produce at least 50% more food than our current levels, because if we carry on going the way we're going, there is absolutely no way that we're going to do that. So obviously there's areas to factor in, such as climate change, the volatility of food prices, and social issues such as poverty and the lack of education. So there are companies out there that are really trying to support this and build a strategy in this area to support companies, farmers specifically, build a better way of life. So I guess if you haven't seen the Vodafone sustainable pages or the work that they're doing, I'd highly recommend going and looking at that, because there's so much you can learn about, from, you know, biochemicals to non-toxic foodings to harvesting by robots. I mean, this dog tooth technology that I found out about, I think it was brought up in Cambridge. I think that's when the company was founded, so where it was founded. And it's a particularly challenging problem within the agricultural industry, if you like. And this, I think I meant about, you know, human time, human hours. How many humans can you know, bring into a farm, or a farm, if you like, and, you know, constantly make sure that they're ongoing with work. People get sick, right? People get poorly. There's 365 days a human just naturally cannot work. It's not healthy. So Dogtooth is a technology that has the largest fleet of robots worldwide, and I believe they spend half their time in Australia and half their time in the UK, with Hugh Lau Farms actually, which I thought was really cool. And they have sort of 5 pillars that they go by, and that's really to improve renewable energy, increase carbon footprint, improve productivity from every input, reduce crop waste, and also just improve fuel efficiency globally. So technology has a very big role to play in the farming industry. They have a leaf wheel that they showed, which I thought was really interesting, and on that leaf wheel they had different areas that they spoke around about energy efficiency, animal cruelty, crop health and protection, soil management and fertility, organization and planning, water management, landscape and conservations, and pollutions, and all these kind of nice things. So I'd highly recommend doing some research in agriculture and tech and seeing how you can invest in the future to make it better. Because with the way we're going at the moment, I just don't think that innovation is going to come, you know, with our eyes closed. These are the kind of things that we have to support in order to be more innovative and support economic growth. And obviously having a diverse workforce within that definitely helps, that's for sure. So talking about diverse workforces, McKinsey & Co examined over 1,000 companies across 12 countries and found that firms in the top quartile for gender diversity are 21% more likely to enjoy above average profitability than companies in the bottom quartile. So that's something to think about, that's for sure. So, taking this information and looking at how the 33% are more likely to see a higher than average profits than companies in the lower quartile, what are we doing? Because it seems that diversity has the most obvious impact on financial performance when found through executive teams, or be it directly people being in charge of generating revenue. But the least diverse companies in both gender and ethnic teams are 29% and more likely to underperform in terms of profitability, one consultant said at the McKinsey group. So if it's that obvious, why does it take so much for this gap to close quicker? Here are some examples of what's in progress. So racial and ethnic diversity has a stronger impact on financial performances in the United States than gender diversity, and perhaps because of earlier efforts, be it from the last 10 years, to increase women's representation in top levels of business. They've already yielded positive results, and there's many companies out there within the top 4 finance companies as well that you can see this in. Probably a bit hard to believe, but it is true. And in the United Kingdom, greater gender diversity on senior executive teams corresponded to the highest performance uplifts in our dataset. So every 10% increase in gender diversity within the EBIT rose by 3.5%. So that's something positive. Then you've also got certain industries that perform better on gender diversity and other industries on ethnic and racial diversity. No industry or company in the top quartile on both dimensions. So that's also interesting to see, what's happening there. Now, I'm not suggesting that achieving greater diversity is easy. Women accounting for an average of just 16% of the members of executive teams in the United States, so 12% of the UK and 6% in Brazil, still remain underrepresented at the top corporations globally. Now, even though the UK does comparatively better in racial diversity, albeit at low levels, some even 78% of the UK companies have senior leadership teams that fail to show and reflect the demographic composition of the UK's labour force and population, compared to like 91% in Brazil and 97% in the US. So these numbers underline the work that remains to be done, obviously. Even if it's the case for greater diversity becoming more compelling, we still need to be deeply connected to the world and people, and just make sure that whenever you see a talent, for example, that you want to pop in a pipeline, you want to attract, develop, mentor, sponsor, retain the next generation, to have those right global leaders, now's the time to do it. Because even where I work now, I look at the men to women ratio, and luckily, I think I've said this before, we do have a higher number of women than we do to men in my organization. However, if you look at a global number, the rate isn't great. So we do really need to talk about what's happening around the recruitment teams, what's happening with companies looking at DEI, how what's happening, or some examples, for example, of the impact of women in technology on innovation and economic growth currently. Now, I did some research because, I'm a research queen, and I found that diversity generates more revenue. And I've said this quite a bit during this podcast, so I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but Boston Consulting Group and the Technical University of Munich conducted a study. This is separately, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but they conducted a study to understand the relationship between diversity and management. And the results show that increasing the diversity of leadership teams actually leads to more and better innovation and improved financial performance in both developing and developed economies. So, again, what's happening here? Within the Fortune 500 companies, there's at least 3 women leading top positions. And so those companies saw a 66% increase in ROI and have purchasing power of estimated around $5 trillion. That's so much. So it's pretty hard to deny that women of that value, if you like, are also responsible for the most household spending decisions. And not taking advantage of female presence in the workplace seems like a bit of a gamble for most businesses. And I don't think that I would take that gamble if I was them. So again, diversity generates more revenue, and women thinking different as well. So I think I've mentioned this before. By nature and interacting with a diverse team, this kind of forces people to prepare and anticipate for alternative viewpoints. Now, I've seen this with some of the women on my board of leadership. Now, they have a difference in opinion or perspective that makes them assume that, for example, maybe perhaps they need to work a little bit harder. But actually, when you come do a consensus and realize that we can all benefit from that kind of pressure, actually, and men and women do see things differently, and we can bring unique ideas to the table to again better enable everyone to problem solve, and this can boost performance. And I've seen sort of for example, in the past and currently, like my CEOs work with different women on board and males and come with such a great story eventually that they sort of sell globally to all parts of the organization. And it does have a really good, a powerful recruitment drive, and also really good retainment of current staff, because you just believe in the strategy and you really do believe in the way of working, and you can feel it. I think culture you have to feel. So when you do feel something, you do think, hold on a second, I feel valued, I feel like I'm part of something here. So yeah, I definitely think that having women on the board also allows people to think a little bit differently. So saying some of this stuff, there's also groups on Twitter, there's groups on Instagram, LinkedIn, that bring organizations and also just individuals together to increase the innovation and economic growth within technology, and also just building more of a diverse workforce by, in terms of sort of problem solving and creativity. So those groups are groups such as Girls Can Code, Black Girls Can Code, Women in Tech, Women in Telecoms Technology, for example, is the one group that I know close to me. But there are so many groups on Twitter that I can tag on socials, and if there are any other pieces of groups or information that I find, I can share them on Twitter or Instagram. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope everyone learned something a little bit new about the innovation of economic growth, specifically whilst having a diverse workforce as well. And I hope you all tune into my next episode, where I'll have my first person that I've interviewed. She's not the first person I've interviewed, but it's the first person that will be on this podcast that I've interviewed. So I'm really, really excited to have her on board. She is an incredible person. I don't want to say too much. She comes from a law background and has a really great story. So I hope you all tune into that, and I will be releasing that in a couple of days or next week. So tune in. I hope you enjoyed this. And again, thank you so much for listening, sharing, and thank you so much for the feedback from all across the globe. It's been really, really nice to hear what you all have to say. And I'm really happy to hear that I could change at least just one person's life and bring more women to the tech world, or in general, just the corporate world. Thank you all. Love and peace. Sweetie. Bye.